Welcome to the CHCI Fall Tech Summit panel, Our Digital Communities, Infrastructure that can close the digital divide. Thank you to the generous support of our sponsors, Amazon, Cox Enterprise, HP, and NCTA, the Internet and Television Association. Our panel hosts for today will be Congressman Adriano Espaillat of New York's 13th District and Congressman Mark A. Vesey of Texas's 33rd District. Congressman Espaillat is the first Dominican American to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. He currently serves as a member of the U.S. House Committee on Appropriations and the House Committee on Education and Labor. He is second vice chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Congressman Vesey represents an ethnically diverse district that spans across the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. He serves on the Committee on Energy and Commerce and the Armed Services Committee. We have welcoming remarks from Nilda Gums, Chief of Staff for NCTA, the National Cable and Telecommunications Association. Our moderator for today's session is Thomas Romanoff, Director of Technology Policy for the Bipartisan Policy Center. Previously, he led IT initiatives for several U.S. federal agencies and advised executive leadership on the impact of new and emerging technologies on government operations. He worked for several years with the Office of Management and Budget, published federal-wide IT cybersecurity policy, and developing modernization initiatives. Please welcome Congressman Adriano Espaillat, Congressman Mark A. Vesey, and Nilda Gums, followed by our moderator, Thomas Romanoff.
Hi, I'm Congressman Adriano Espaillat, representing New York's 13th Congressional District. Only 65% of Latino families have access to reliable broadband, and it's unacceptable. We can and we must close the digital divide, and each of you here today are the leaders that can help us do that. Thank you for your efforts. Vamos a cerrar la brecha digital and keep the faith.
Hi, this is Congressman Mark Vesey of Texas's 33rd District, representing the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and I want to extend a big thanks to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute for hosting their annual Fall Tech Summit. The COVID-19 pandemic underscored the importance of broadband access with work, school, healthcare, and not to mention just basic communication between friends and family, taking place primarily online over the last year and a half. It has become imperative that all Americans have access to fast, reliable internet, no matter what their background is. But unfortunately, many families still struggle to access this basic service, including many in the North Texas Congressional District that I represent. For example, only 65% of Latino families have access to broadband compared to 80% of white families, locking them out of incredible educational opportunities offered online. That is why programs like the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program I created last year has been so critical. This groundbreaking program helps economically vulnerable Americans afford their monthly internet bill and provides a lifeline, a very important one for low-income and minority communities. And I'm proud to say that the work I did with my colleagues on the Energy and Commerce Committee during the 116th and now 117th helped launch this program and is now ensuring that it will continue to serve families. Last year, in May 2020, I introduced legislation that will provide low or free cost internet to low-income individuals that have recently been laid off due to COVID-19. My 2020 legislation also had provisions that help provide devices such as laptops, desktops, tablets to eligible households and families so they could continue to work, look for a job, or just complete their homework online. Key provisions of this legislation were included in the sweeping COVID-19 stimulus package that was signed into law. As I said before, last year's legislation that laid the groundwork to launch the EBB program and help close the digital divide while we're getting through the pandemic. I'm also proud that the bipartisan infrastructure package that Congress will soon pass bolsters this program and makes it last for long term. Under this package, Texas will receive a minimum allocation of $100 million to help provide broadband coverage to millions of Texans who lack it. And it will help make emergency broadband benefit a permanent solution, which will help the constituents that I represent to make sure that this program is long lasting until we can get back some sense of normalcy. Again, I want to thank the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute for inviting me here today to give a quick few remarks, and I look forward to continuing our work together to expand broadband access and close the digital divide.
Hi, on behalf of NCTA, the Internet and Television Association, welcome to CHCI's Fall Tech Summit and this session on closing the digital divide. I bring you personal greetings and best wishes from our president and CEO, Michael Powell. Cable admires the leadership role that CHCI plays in this space. We appreciate the efforts of the Institute and its great team under Marco Davis to bring our Latinx community to full parity with the majority population when it comes to broadband access. For this community of strivers, entrepreneurs, innovators, families, and patriotic Americans, nothing will do but to ensure that we close the digital divide for them. As the group of companies that first brought you broadband to American consumers, we uniquely realized this is no easy task. When our companies first saw the potential of high-speed internet in the 1990s, we invested hundreds of billions of dollars to build the networks that now make it available. Then, when we saw the emergence of digital inequities more than a decade later, we rolled out programs such as Comcast Internet Essentials, Charter Spectrum Internet Assist, and Cox's Connect to Compete. These were efforts to dramatically reduce the cost of broadband service, make hardware and devices more affordable, and provide training in digital literacy to help get everyone on board. And today, a quarter century after the rollout of residential broadband service, we've been deeply engaged in public-private partnerships, such as Education Superhighway's Bridge to Broadband, to reach the diminishing numbers of American families that still may not have broadband service wherever they reside. All the while, we look to leverage our industry's commitment to diversity, education, inclusion, and belonging to ensure service equity for people of color and other underserved communities. Are we there yet? Clearly we're not, but we are confident that through continued collaboration with you and other leaders in this effort, as well with our public servants who care so passionately about the welfare of their constituents, there is plenty more progress to be made in the years ahead. We have some great minds assembled on today's panel to share with you some of their solutions to these challenges. I can't wait to hear their ideas and suggestions for progress. Thank you for joining us today and enjoy the dialogue over this next hour.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Thomas Romanoff. I'm the Director of Technology Project here at Bipartisan Policy Center. I'm honored to be here today to lead this discussion. I want to send a special thank you to Representatives Adriana Espaillat and Mark Visi for setting the stage with their opening remarks. A big thank you to CHCI for hosting this tech summit, focusing attention on the important topic of infrastructure to address the digital divide. I want to take a moment to discuss what the digital divide means for Americans. The fact that we are meeting here today on a virtual platform with hundreds of people listening shows that we are fortunate enough to not only have broadband access, but also the tools needed to log in and hear our great panelists' perspectives. These tools and access are increasingly vital to our communities to access the digital economy and its opportunities. The barriers for people of color and the Latino community to access these opportunities are numerous. But with the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, there is new hope that tackles some of these. The funds are available at a staggering and unprecedented amount, over $65 billion for broadband programs alone. There's bipartisan support and the funds are here. Now we need to execute and ensure the programs reach those who are in need. Without action, this moment will pass, and it is up to those who want to see their communities connected to get the job done. I'm delighted to be joined today with four experts on this topic. First, please welcome Alejandro Rourke, Executive Director of the Hispanic Technology and Telecommunications Partnership. He collaborates with HTTP member organizations to set the national Latino tech policy agenda that creates opportunities for national and local advocates to engage with Congress and the administration.
Happy to be here.
Next, let's welcome Naneka Charizard, Vice President of Government and Public Affairs for Cox Enterprises. She oversees internal and external affairs in Virginia and North Carolina and leads the team entrusted with enhancing company revenues, customer satisfaction, economic development, diversity and inclusion, community goodwill, and positive relations. Naneka is passionate about creating a culture of belonging and that drives innovation and fuels growth. Hi, Naneka.
Hi, glad to be here.
Thanks for being with us. Next up is Kalpek Goody, Head of Domestic Regulatory Affairs and Project Kuiper at Amazon. He has more than 20 years experience both inside government and in the private industry, in the telecommunication field and technology fields, including positions at the FCC and the Council on Telecommunications Subcommittee, Senate Subcommittee on Commerce. Thanks, Kalpek.
On behalf of Amazon and Project Kuiper, I want to thank you so much for inviting me to speak and participate in the panel today. Very excited. Thank you.
And finally, please welcome Betty Garcia Hill, the Global Education Technologist at HP. She has 18 years of experience in K-12 public education. Previously, Betty was instrumental at launching the Houston Independent School District's at-home initiative during the COVID-19 pandemic, helping transition the 7th largest district in the U.S. to online instruction and assessment. She's an advocate for digital equity for underserved communities. Hi, Betty.
Thank you for having me here, Tom.
My pleasure. And thank you very much. Welcome to the panel and thank you for joining us today. Participants who are listening in, please feel free to tweet your comments about this session at CHCI Summit. That's hashtag CHCI Summit. And we'd love to see what questions you have for the panelists. Feel free to drop your questions into the chat box as well. So I'll jump right in with my first question, and this is for Naneka. What are some of the lessons learned from the pandemic? And if you have any success stories, can you share them?
Sure, Tom. Well, I'd like to start by saying a huge shout out to CHCI for convening us around this important topic. And on behalf of Cox, we're really pleased to be here to talk about our shared purpose of bridging the digital divide, right? Stopping that gap and creating equitable opportunities for all. Tom, you asked a really great questions, lessons learned from the pandemic. As I like to say, we're still learning from the pandemic, because I don't know about you all, but the pandemic isn't quite over, right? One of the lessons that we're learning that we definitely cemented last year is the importance of public-private partnerships with a capital P. We recognized shortly after March, when there was that outbreak and a lot of us were sent home, that we at Cox, when we talk about, our role as being the custodians of fostering moments of connection, that connection came to life last year. We recognized that broadband connection in some cases was responsible or helped loved ones see their loved ones pass away or have their last moments together. And so in partnership with a number of state, local, and federal partners, we decided to embark on an even more serious effort of how do we make sure no one is left behind or left in the gap from a digital perspective. And Congress has done an amazing job of devoting billions towards the pandemic and the pandemic response. And one of the ways that we try to leverage that, for example, is with the emergency broadband benefit. And we learned there, in partnership with the federal funds, the importance of signing people onto the program. I'm proud to say, Tom, that at this moment, since the program launched in May, we've signed on more than 100,000 customers to EBB, which is huge. Another big lesson that we learned under the umbrella of public-private partnerships is ensuring that children are not left behind, in partnership with the localities and the schools that deal with the children. Case in point, Nevada, Las Vegas. So with Clark County Schools in Nevada, we partner with them to ensure that no child in any public school in that county was left behind virtually. And we were able to connect more than 100,000 children. That's huge. San Diego, we partnered with the city there to offer 250 hotspots. 250 hotspots on its face might not seem like a lot, but when you consider the fact that that gave access to 50,000 children in the San Diego area were now finally able to get online when they otherwise wouldn't have. That was huge. And there are so many other ways that we've tried to partner with our state, local, and federal partners to put the P in partnership, including partnering with state governments, for example, in Virginia, in using funds to build broadband to areas that do not currently have broadband or are not served. So I can go on and on and on about the lessons learned, but one of the biggest takeaways that I'd love folks to consider is this. We recognized early on at the onset of the pandemic that at Cox, we have about 1.8 million of our customers, right, are from the Latino community. 18% of our footprint consists of folks from this community. Our employees are in this community, right? And so we started to say to ourselves, what more can we do? One of the lessons we learned is the importance of ensuring that our literature has that multilingual component to it. Not everyone has English as a first language. And so we're looking at ways to incorporate that in our new affordability programs. Another thing that we learned, Tom, you need to stop me because I'm a talker, but I'll say this. Another thing that we learned during the pandemic is it wasn't enough for us to say, you know what, we want to bridge the digital divide. It wasn't enough for us to say we want to partner with cities to make broadband available to these children. We also realized that we needed to take a hard look at our equitable digital equity programs. And we've revamped one of those programs right now to ensure that affordable internet is made available through Connect to Compete, which a lot of people know, but also through a new program called Connect Assist, which allows those who do not have school children to also gain access to affordable broadband. So all that said, the lesson that we're still learning is how can we become even better partners, even stronger partners in these communities, as well as other communities that we serve, that we know are historically have been left behind in the digital divide. Tom, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, I appreciate it. And we'll get to the other panelists, but I want to pull on that thread a little bit. So you said that, you know, there's a lot to connecting to communities. So how would you work with communities to bridge the divide that's other than just fiber?
That's a great question. So the first thing I would say is trust. If you're like me and you migrated to the United States, or if you're also like me and English is not your first language, you might not necessarily be inclined to trust a government program, or you might not be inclined to trust a company that you don't know of. One of the things that we do at Cox and we do well is what we call give where you live. So we ensure that we give our employees access, the ability to offer their time and treasure in the communities in which they live or other communities to build that trust. And that has gone a long way for us, Tom, right? Being able to partner with nonprofit organizations, being able to partner with our local Hispanic chambers of commerce, the Boys and Girls Clubs, which were huge partners of ours last year. These are ways that we've been able to build trust, not just in the Hispanic community, but in all the communities that we serve to show that we're good partners. And here's the low-hanging fruit, I would say, that came of that. So last year, with the outbreak of the pandemic, right, there were certain counties or localities that called upon us to say, we need devices or we need access to internet. By the time we showed up, we had our guys and gals show up in the truck to provide that service. That trust was already established. Unlike in the past, some folks would have said, well, why is Cox offering low-cost internet or affordable internet? Those barriers had been removed. We also knew people in the communities to reach out to and call to ensure that these resources were getting to the right hands. So that, I would say, the biggest way is giving where you live. And by give, it's not just treasure, it's not just throwing resources at the problem. Be a presence in the community, give your time to the community, get to know people in the community, because it all comes down to the people.
Very fast, great stuff. And, you know, speaking of trust in the community, nothing more needed in this world than trust in your education system. So I want to kick it over to Betty for the infrastructure bill. You know, includes funding for schools to connect their students and provide computers in their home. How has this impacted the way education is delivered? And are there any special considerations that policymakers should be aware of to ensure access for Latino communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. Education is simply not the same today as when you and I went to school. Effective 21st century learning that prepares our scholars for the jobs of the future must include blended learning best practices. This would include videos, online discussions, critical thinking, problem solving, and as we've seen, very purposeful asynchronous content with student centered projects that really empower our kids and that are critical in the classroom today, as well as homework activities. Additionally, due to unfinished learning because of the recent loss of instructional time, we're going to see that more and more schools are going to purchase online solutions that personalize and tier instruction to fill in these gaps. This may include leveled reading books and other key resources to support students. So, a quality device and reliable internet is simply not a luxury, right? It's a necessity. And just as we would never deny students to a textbook, then unresolved inequities to device an unreliable internet would surmount to pretty much the same. So, this federal funding, like ESSER and this new infrastructure bill, are a true investment to our children that will have a tremendous impact on our community. Something that policymakers may consider is that in the Hispanic culture, it is not unusual to have large, right? So when we combine this with poverty and multiple children, there might be multiple children that may live in a small apartment or large multi-generational households that may share a small space. So besides internet access that can handle multiple devices, students need a quiet place to study. So we need to have social supports to increase the effectiveness and the productivity of the use of these online platforms, particularly for our disadvantaged students and families. Another thing to consider that seems to be top of mind for our education leaders is the sustainability of all of these initiatives. They worry about the total cost of ownership of devices, the maintenance, the refresh cycles. So they need to, continue to support these one-to-one programs. And this was already a problem prior to the pandemic, and it's only been further exacerbated post-pandemic.
Fascinating. So one thing you hit upon is connection to the internet, and I want to ask Calpec about Project Kuiper and it's launching satellites next year to partner with Verizon in connecting Americans to these low orbiting satellites that provide broadband. How does this impact the digital divide, and what are the obstacles to deploying a system like this?
That's a great question. I think from Amazon's perspective, let me describe the constellation in the first instance. Uh, Project Kuiper is a major initiative by Amazon to solve what has been an intractable problem in terms of access, not just in the United States, but around the world. Amazon is committed to spending up or initially $10 billion and more if necessary to build Project Kuiper, which is a low Earth orbiting satellite constellation, initially with 3,236 satellites covering the globe to be able to really connect and bring the internet everywhere in the world. That is very exciting. But what we realized right off the top is, as capable as that constellation is, it is very important that we recognize we can't do it alone in terms of solving the digital divide. Amazon is capable of a lot of things, but the problem's magnitude are really enormous. So partnering with entities that are out there, helping them extend their networks, bringing 5G connectivity out into areas more quickly than others could do alone is an important part of what Project Kuiper enables. So working with a Verizon, who we couldn't be more excited to work with, the leading wireless provider and operator in the world, really gives a clear sign of what this constellation is capable of and will be capable of in terms of delivering real benefits to consumers around the world. So extending networks is part of it. Reaching homes directly will be part of what Kuiper does. Reaching government, emergency responders. Really helping, at the end of the day, what is the core purpose and focus of what Amazon does every day. We focus on our customer. how are we bringing value and benefits to the customer? We recognize that the digital divide is an important and incredible issue to solve and to resolve going forward. People ask us all the time, why does Amazon want to build satellites and build a constellation and network? And really, that is a great question, but one which gets at the center and goals of Amazon, which is we looked at a major problem and said, we can make a difference there. We can make a difference in a way that few others can. Obviously, this is very expensive in terms of project, but what we recognized is satellites are an important piece of this, but our knowledge and experience on the ground, our network through AWS, fiber network around the world, our ability to deliver products anywhere in the world, our ability to connect people in lots of other ways is a basis on which we can build a very successful system to, again, help close the digital divide in ways that few others can. So we're really excited about that, and partnering with Verizon is absolutely exciting because we think we can help even quicker deliver solutions that narrow the gap.
It's very interesting, and it's it strikes me that a lot of these essential goods and services online are more important than ever. And I want to ask Betty, how do you feel that the federal government can maximize their resources and ensure digital equity specifically for the Latino community?
Absolutely, Tom. Before joining HP, I was an educational leader at Houston ISD, where I had the privilege of pivoting 215,000 students to online instruction in a matter of days. So you can imagine it was all hands on deck. And I was able to experience firsthand the profoundness of the digital literacy gap. Although we were providing scholars with hotspots and devices, many of our Latino community did not know how to use these devices as a learning tool. An example comes to mind. While I was in a call center servicing our Spanish community, I had the privilege of serving a parent who didn't know what a web browser was or how to effectively use a web address. She needed empathy, she needed patience, and step-by-step support to connect her child with vital educational content. And I wish I could say that this was a unique and isolated case, but we saw hundreds of parents in a similar situation. And although many knew the basics, they didn't know how to use these learning resources to support home learning. So additionally, I was only one of a handful of bilingual resources. But the reality is in many districts, they didn't have any bilingual resources, leaving parents with no one to call. Right? So resolving this digital divide is a journey, but digital literacy is key in ensuring that we empower our communities on how to use these tools to empower their families. Ideally, this can be more than just proper education for students, right? It can provide solutions where mom and dad can apply for jobs, or the whole family can get health care, and elevate the family as a whole. The federal government can maximize its resources by having a hyper focus on equity. As we know, there's a difference between equality and equity, really putting funds, not necessarily spread broadly, but instead equity can be achieved when focus is placed on providing resources to those who need it most. And funds then can be focused on filling the gaps for those who truly need it. Additionally, the federal government, along with education and industry leaders, can work together to provide digital literacy campaigns and other community opportunities to engage and empower families. When we elevate Latino students, the impact is to the entire family. But when we elevate Latino families, we really elevate our entire community.
It's a great point, Betty. And I'm very curious to get Alejandro's perspective. Alejandro, you've been patiently waiting over there, and I just want to get your perspective on how to overcome some of these barriers to make digital access more equitable.
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you for being here and completely understand and empathize with the comments of my fellow panelists. I think that it's important to contextualize the digital divide or the digital cliff that the Latino community currently finds themselves facing. In their most recent findings published earlier this year, Pew Research found that 65% of Latino households and 71% of Black households have an at-home broadband connection, and that's compared to 81% of white households. They also found that having internet connection at home correlates directly with the average household income of that family, with those who earn $50,000 a year or less being the least likely to be able to afford having an at-home broadband subscription. I think that it's also worth noting that the median household income for Latino households in 2019 was around $56,000 a year, and we know that that number fell significantly due to the economic shock of the global health crisis. For the Latino community, for multicultural community, access to broadband really means having access to new modes of learning, increased access to healthcare, the ability to prepare for the jobs of the future, and most importantly, the ability to move beyond being just passive consumers on our mobile devices, but the ability to co-create an inclusive 21st century economy where all of us have the opportunity to build, connect, and to thrive. I think the good news is that President Biden has prioritized equitable access to broadband in the bipartisan infrastructure plan, which he signed earlier this week, which makes the largest ever investment in broadband availability and adoption in our nation's history. And that funding that is being allocated is flexible enough to address the three compounding barriers that we consistently see stalling broadband adoption for the Latino community, and that's access, affordability, and digital preparedness.
So, just pulling on that thread a little bit, what needs to be done with the infrastructure bill, and how do we make sure that Latinos have access to some of these funds?
Yeah, so I think that today is such an incredible moment, and we have a unique opportunity to use every tool in our toolbox. Like I think a lot of our, this is a great panel because we have, innovative new approaches by deploying kind of like broadband available through a constellation of satellites. We have affordable programs like the ones that Cox is participating in. And we have a renewed kind of sense of the fact that broadband is essential to the health and economic well-being of everyone. And so I think that having affordability programs like the EBB is important and necessary for low-income households. I think that and depending on your community, meaningful competition could also be important. Extending our infrastructure to rural communities is very important. And I think that in order for us to establish an equitable baseline of access across the country, we need to improve the decision-making process at the state and local level, which will be receiving these funds. And I think that requires, first and foremost, that we expand our internal capacity at the state and local level to make informed choices about that are supported by a robust and inclusive stakeholder engagement process. That includes historically excluded communities, as well as state and local government leaders and private industry, so that we can build innovative solutions supported by new tools and within the spirit of collaboration that will help us connect as many people as possible as soon as possible. I have seen kind of firsthand in the work that we've done at HCTP, the willingness of members of Congress, the leaders at the FCC, at the Department of Commerce, USDA, and even with our friends, at internet service providers, we're all coming together to reimagine the way that this essential services like broadband are made available, and that delivers on the president's promise to jumpstart the economy. Through the Consolidated Appropriations Act, the American Rescue Plan Act, the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act, state and local communities finally will now have the tools and resources necessary to understand the depth of the digital divide, to lead their own mapping efforts, to understand where coverage gaps exist, to conduct an inventory of local assets, and then to make data-driven decisions with integrated strategies that address access, affordability, digital skills, and how to get connected devices into the hands of every student and household that needs them, so that no one is left offline and everyone has the opportunity to succeed.
Fantastic. And, this gets to a little bit of the questions that we got around rural broadband access, but I also want to encourage, if you're listening on this, to tweet any questions you have at CHCI Summit, or just drop them into the chat box, and we'll try to get to them towards the end here. But there was a question that popped up around mapping, and I want to acknowledge that it's a well-known challenge. And Calpic, I was wondering if you could give some insights given your work in finding areas of the U.S. that would benefit from some of these connections with low orbiting satellites. Can you describe some of the issues that we face?
Yeah, again, great question. I think the mapping issue is well known in the sense that the challenges with the maps that the FCC has right now really are very extensive. Just because fiber passes a building doesn't mean the building is connected. Fiber passes a community doesn't mean the community is connected. I think getting more fidelity into understanding who really has access and who doesn't is the first part of it. I think a number of the other panelists have talked about access being more than just availability. Cost is an enormous piece of that. And how do you capture people's ability to get access to broadband services, I think is one that the mapping exercise really has to do a better job of. As I said, access in terms of fiber passing and connectivity are two very different things. But I think what's important also to look beyond that and to say, there's so many new technologies coming. Satellites are one of them, but they're not alone. And to solve this problem that has been identified by the various broadband maps that are created is going to take a diversity of technology solutions, and government needs to use these mapping technologies, marry them to the plethora of technology solutions that are out there, both wireline and wireless, satellites as well, unlicensed, licensed, to do the important work of really narrowing that digital divide. So I think that's what's in front of us. I think the FCC has an enormous challenge. That big pile of money of $65 billion sounds big, but what we all know is that disappears very quickly, and we can end up with still extensive areas with lack of connectivity. Under the current maps, what we saw was the past broadband bill. The winners of that, in many cases, or in some cases, to be fair, were areas that really did not require broadband access funding to solve. There are anecdotes about parking lots being funded in urban areas to get connectivity for no particular purpose. I think that needs to be solved. This money is not wasted, and that the right people get access to it. So we think it's incredibly important, the work that's been done, but it's the beginning, not the end.
And Naneka, you had your hand up. Do you have something to add there?
Yeah, Tom, I just wanted to double click on what Kalpak just said about ensuring that these resources are not wasted or are used appropriately. There's a point Alejandro made that I think is important to underscore earlier, and that is empowering the state and local governments, right, in this process of us digitizing these communities that could be left behind. And one of the key things there, Kalpak and my fellow panelists, I would argue is in ensuring too that this $65 billion is really used judiciously and really goes to serving those who wouldn't have. I think the states and the local governments have a huge role to play. I'll give you an example. In Las Vegas, Clark County, as I mentioned to you earlier, one of the challenges that we faced early on in trying to roll out broadband to those who didn't have there was the language barrier. We had to lean on the Clark County Public Schools staff who had a trusted relationship with members of the community to go door to door during a pandemic to get them to sign up. Again, but for that local partnership, in partnership with the county, right, it would have been harder. So Kalpak, I'm all with you in terms of making sure these funds are used appropriately. And I think having the local and state governments work with the private sector too in ensuring these funds are dispersed well is the way to go. Had to throw that in there, Tom. I'll keep quiet now.
Oh, thank you so much. That's great. So Betty, I have a question for you. How would you provide support to empower the community?
Yeah, HP is committed, right, to empower the Latino community, and they've done this in a multi-pronged fashion. We have what we call the HP Path program, and it's focused on digital equity for four key groups. They focus on women and girls, historically marginalized communities of color, teachers and practitioners, and finally, people with disabilities. In 2015, our goal was to improve educational outcomes for 100 million people. And as of calendar quarter 3, by 2021, we had achieved 65 million outcomes globally. So we're happy to say we're on track to exceed our 100 million goal. And we've only added on to that. Our new goal is to improve digital equity for 100 million people by 2030. So we're doubling down and we're even more aggressive now. We're wanting to accomplish this in 8 years. A few highlights of that work have included HP laptop giveaways through the Parents Supporting Parents in New York organization led by Tanisha Grant. This is a community grassroots organization that is focused on providing laptops for Black and Brown children in their community to break the cycle of poverty in hopes that this improves their lives through the entire community through better communication for their children. We also have HP Turn to Learn. And there we sent out hundreds of thousands of printing learning packets at no cost to students who had no access to remote or distance learning due to circumstances, whether it was no device, no connectivity, or homelessness. Additionally, we have focused on teachers. So we have the HP Online Teaching Assistant, and this is a program that provides teachers with the supports that they need to be able to switch, right, to that digital instruction in a seamless way as possible and giving them an additional support. We have HP Print, Play, and Learn, which is a program for parents, and it offers additional learning activities at home to help with that unfinished learning gap to give them some more resources. And HP is consistently looking to partner with amazing organizations like Girls Rising that's focused on improving education for women and children of color inside and outside the United States. This is truly global work. And another great partner that comes to mind is the Global Business Coalition for Education. And what's unique about this is that we partner with organizations to create what we call a partner flywheel that amplifies any impact we have. So we provide the device and then we amplify it, ensuring that we partner with someone that can provide the connectivity. So we believe in empowering our communities and know that there's much more to be done, but there's also much more to come.
Fascinating. So we have about 3 minutes left, and I want to ask this of all of my panelists here today. And maybe in 1 minute, no more than 1 minute each, with the passage of the infrastructure bill, what are you excited to see happen with these programs? And I'll start with Alejandro.
Yeah, I think that what is clear, even just on this panel, is that achieving universal access is a team lift. I am so excited that states and local communities who are closest to the problem are finally able to receive the support that they need to make universal access a reality, and that the president and the federal agencies responsible for creating and administering these funding programs are prioritizing equity, opportunity, and choice, as well as a clear focus on unserved and underserved communities. So I'm excited to see us all continue to engage and to really kind of build the human capacity at the local level so that we can coordinate a lot of these activities so that our community has access to information about all of these resources that some are available now, today, that they might not know about. So very happy to be here.
Great. And Naneka, what are you excited about?
Well, Tom, I'm excited about this, right? So at Cox, we started our journey of bridging the digital divide more than 10 years ago, right? We started this journey when it wasn't even sexy. And so to have the infrastructure bill passed, to know that there are funds that are going to enable us to do even more, right? As Americans, we find really exciting. For example, we have about 100 boys and girls clubs that we've empowered to be innovation hubs. We're looking forward to how the infrastructure bill will allow us to even boost more of those boys and girls clubs in America. We've got more than 50% of folks who we connected online last year through our Connect to Compete program. We're excited to say right now that we've launched a new program called Connect Assist that allows folks in partnership with federal funds to get broadband at no cost. And so with this bill passing, for us, it's, wow, what more can we do? How much further can we take our journey at Cox in really just nailing the coffin on this digital divide issue once and for all?
That's great. Calpec, 15 seconds or less. What are you excited about?
I think I have to agree with Alejandro and Neka's comments. I think what we're most excited about is the commitment that $65 billion shows. But I do want to say that this is the beginning, not the end. I think government policymakers really have to take that money, focus it on those who really need it, improve access. It's more than just access because fiber passes by. But it is access to make sure the communities really have it. I think this is the beginning of policy changes that can also drive change, improve spectrum policy, improve competition policy. Let's bring access to everyone affordably and equitably. I think that's what we're most excited about.
And Betty,
I'll
what are you
keep it
excited
really
about
short.
with this?
Super excited, first of all, for the awareness and then the commitment in behalf of the federal government. But I think it's the beginning of a journey. I think there's still much to be done. I think it's going to take all of us. And so I'm excited how we can continue to work together. And as we say, si se puede, we can do this. Let's close the digital gap together. So cerremos la brecha digital.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to kick it over to, we don't have final words yet, but I do want to get to the question. So I'll just start from the top. And this one comes from Jose. We hear a lot about smart cities, but do we reach the rural regions of America so they are not left behind in the digital age?
Sure, I'll lead off with that and saying yes, but that's why we need the diversity of technology to go make that happen. It won't be one technology that brings connectivity to both urban, suburban, rural areas, all of that together. We need wireline, wireless, satellite technology to go make that happen. We think Project Kuiper is part of that. So yes, it is coming. Connectivity everywhere and anywhere, I think, is our future. But it's going to take a partnership to go make that happen.
Anybody else want to take a swing at that? All right, I'll move on to the next one. Will supply chain issues and global demand for similar capacities significantly delay the implementation of broadband infrastructure funds?
I'll jump on that one initially as well if others aren't. I can say the supply chain issue is real and is significant, but it is not slowing us down at Project Kuiper. I think over the next year and a half, I think expectations are that some of these problems will resolve themselves and we'll get back to a more normal world. I think this can slow us down, but it's not going to stop us.
I'm going to go to, what does the ideal public-private partnership look like? How can it increase the affordability of internet access?
Okay, I'll jump on that one. Or Alejandro, do you want to go?
I mean, Neka, I'm happy to follow up after you.
Sure. So the ideal, I would say, public-private partnership looks like two entities, someone from the public sector and the private sector, sitting down with the community voice at the table and identifying what those needs are, identifying what the priorities are, getting real about the budget regarding how to execute on those priorities. And of course, I have to brag. One case as an example would be Virginia's Telecommunications Initiative, VADI. And with that particular public-private partnership, the way it works is a locality will raise its hand and say, I want to serve X number of communities that are currently unserved. And then it's up to the private sector to meet with the locality and residents from that community and also provide funds towards standing up the project. So the state provides funds and the private sector provides funds as well. I'm proud to say that at Cox, we have participated in a number of those projects and they have been successful. And again, it's a win-win, not just for Cox and for the locality, but for the community as well. That to me is what a great public-private partnership looks like.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I think to follow up with Neka's comment, I think that right now we want to develop strategies and deploy strategies that both short term and long term that connect as many people as possible as soon as possible. And I think that public private partnerships are the quickest link between underserved communities and the potential of getting them connected to the internet economy. So I think that as public-private partnerships really should focus on, like Naneka said, engaging the community. I think that local communities should, like I mentioned before, when I thought that we were logging off, so I said goodbye. But that there really are a lot of resources already out there, and it really and now with all the resources that are available from the federal government, we really do need a dedicated person, either at the city level, at the state level, that's conducting that kind of audit of what services, programs are available in my community now, what are our needs right now, and how can I either centralize those or make them universally accessible. I think that Betty mentioned a lot of great programs that HP has that I didn't really know about. So how do we get that information to Latino families, to historically underserved families? The Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, we launched an entire kind of public awareness campaign and resource hub called ebbparami.com, which is all about supporting Latino families through not only the enrollment process for the program, but how to understand what internet service providers are available in your area, what plans what data plans best meet a family's needs and their long-term budget. So there's a lot of great programs that are available, but what we don't have is a centralized or coordinated mechanism to get those out. And that's where I think that those public-private partnerships really can come in and have a profound impact right away.
So there's two questions that came in that were kind of similar, and I want to I'll go with one that kind of encompasses both. But we know that the future is digital. What can we do to help Latinos develop the skills necessary to access the digital economy?
And I think that I can answer that one. Education's critical. We can provide devices, we can provide connectivity, but the ability to be able to educate our community, to be able to use the tools to leverage them and connect them to the specifics, how to write an effective resume, how to use telemedicine, all of those pieces are going to be critical. So again, I think we've all talked about partnerships, but being able to partner with the right folks, with whether it's the local school districts, whether it's with the local community services, but really being able to create a web of support so that we wrap around these services around the community. But education and digital literacy is key.
Yeah, I would also go for it.
Let's.
I would also add that oftentimes we're consistently going back to local community serving organizations to do a lot of this outreach work because they are the trusted voices at the community level. But where we lack and we have consistently failed is making a proportional investment and building their own capacity to be able to do this outreach work. So I think as we're building these digital equity plans, it's not just enough to ask them or ask us our opinion. It's not just enough to kind of have us be a part of that process, but it also requires us to invest in those trusted voices on the ground, because right now every community serving organization should have a broadband adoption program, should have a digital skills program. And like Betty said, oftentimes we think about digital skills and we think about young people and students, but we really need digital preparedness programs, culturally responsive digital preparedness programs for the entire multi-generational family. That means parents, that means grandparents, because we all need to understand how to not only connect to the internet, but how to thrive online and be safe online.
Naneka, did you want to add on to that?
Alejandro just hit what I was going to say. All I'll add is this. I think it's also incumbent on us right, as an industry, all of us in the tech industry, to do more to show, right, our people in the Hispanic community what they can be. We have a saying, and it's an African saying, you can't be what you cannot see. We need for folks to see more Hispanics in tech. We need for folks to see more diversity in tech. And we need for those folks who sit in those seats to go back to the community and show, hey, if I can do it, you can do it too. So it's beyond digital literacy. Digital literacy is an important first step, right? Making sure folks understand what a web browser is, how to get on Zoom. But let's also have that high goal of digital excellence, right? Making sure people know, wait, I can actually make a career of this. The next Steve Jobs could be Maria Lopez. And we need to start to encourage our youngsters to think about that. I think that's one way we're going to start to see the needle move in terms of digital in the Latino Hispanic community and other communities of color.
All right, we have time for probably one more question from the audience, and that is, a lot of money has been invested into the communities to bridge the digital divide through recent legislation. How do you keep the work going once the money is gone?
I think a lot of those areas have been touched on by all the panelists. I think this is the beginning, not the end. So I think the focus on training, the focus on education is really key. Infrastructure is itself not a solution. Infrastructure is itself not the goal. Infrastructure is a tool at the end of the day. People are the fundamental purpose of all of this. We're trying to improve people's lives, give them opportunities. That really does start with training. It does start with education. It does start with what Naneka was saying, people seeing what they can do with those skill sets. I think that's very, very important to realize. How do we keep this going? We keep this going through training. We keep this going through government policies as well that focus not just on training, but on policies that enable and encourage connectivity. And there are ways and different ways that we don't necessarily think about. I mentioned spectrum access before, enabling greater utilization of spectrum sharing. Why is that important? That's important because you're going to get more different types of providers in. All of that competition will create new solutions, lowering costs. What does that do? It really is fundamental to enabling customers and those, many of who don't have that current access, to get it. So all of those policies need to be put into place, but all of it starts with education and training.
Great. So, we're running pretty short on time. We could probably talk about this pretty much all day. At least I could. But I also want to give our panelists an opportunity for closing remarks. And please keep it to at least 1 minute or no more than 1 minute. And I'll start off with Betty.
Sure, absolutely. 21st century learning prepares our scholars for the jobs of the future. And that's something that I'm very passionate about. So the work that is being done here is really investing in the children in the future. But like we've all said, it's just the beginning. If we support them with digital literacy and building scaffolds that support our entire community, we can do this together.
Thank you. Alejandro.
You know what? I will just invite everybody that's tuning in. Now is the time to really engage. The federal government is trying to figure out how to build programs and interventions at the close of the digital divide. States and local communities are trying to figure it out as well. There are no bad answers or wrong questions. And it really, like I said, this is the moment for all of us at the federal, state, and local level to lean in, to engage, to add our kind of spark of innovation and ingenuity to help solve this problem, because I think that it really takes all of us. And again, this is a unique moment where everything that we do will have hopefully a very kind of impactful, positive effect for generations to come.
Wonderful. Naneka.
So I'm just going to get real and continue with this work. If you or anyone you know or love is low income and is in need of broadband services, affordable broadband, we have Connect to Compete if you have a household with K through 12 children. We have Connect Assist if you're a senior, a veteran, basically if you don't have K through 12 children in your home. Either way, Cox has your back. Please visit our affordability hub, www.cox.com/digital equity. And certainly you'll have information there on how to get these folks on the digital superhighway. If that does not work, I'm an open connector. You can find me on LinkedIn. I will work with you. Our company will work with you and all these partners to make sure our folks get connected online. That's it.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And Calpac.
I will just say thank you for this panel. I think it's a wonderful and so critical topic. The infrastructure bill, as I've said, is the beginning, not the end. There is so much coming, rich content, rich opportunities to change our lives. The world of internet everywhere is really the future that I think we all see coming. We want to make sure that that infrastructure or that internet everywhere opportunity really goes to everyone. It shouldn't be cost limited. And I think that is the next step that we're all working on. And at Project Kuiper at Amazon, one of our key focuses is to bring down the cost of access. And we're going to be focusing on that. But we think that really is the next challenge. And we're excited about it. And we're thrilled to be part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank the panelists for a very thoughtful discussion today. It's been great having you. I can give you just 1 minute of my main takeaways here. From what we talked about, it's pretty clear to me that a public-private partnership is necessary in order to see success with connectivity in these communities. Language is important, making sure that we have folks that speak the language that we're trying to connect to in the community. And that builds trust, which is a major theme on this panel. We need to have trust in order to connect folks that have not been connected before. And partnership in a community is key for this. And I just want to thank the panelists for their discussion today, and I also want to thank the participants today for listening in. Please keep tweeting about us at the Tech Summit, hashtag CHCI Summit. That's hashtag CHCI Summit, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you, everybody.